Well, hello there, and welcome to the Catholic Underground, which is your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. It's episode number 192. I'm Father Chris Decker. Joining us this week, we've got, well, Josh. Joshua LeBlanc from Bayou Lane Computer Solutions in Abbeville, Louisiana. Hello, Joshua.
I'm sorry to disappoint that I'm it.
That's right. It's just you. Father Ryan, actually, shall we say where Father Ryan is?
I think he's sede vacante.
That's right. He is almost technically sede vacante. He has no seat to sit on. His church is there.
He's waiting for the other half of his house to arrive.
That's right. That's right. We can say that he has arrived in the middle of nowhere because his house, his rectory, is being rolled in two pieces. And so we are here to keep vigil with you as that. I wish we had a webcam of that happening, but we don't.
There's a Facebook picture.
There is a Facebook picture. That's true. So if you're friends with Father Ryan, or you can just search him out on Facebook and see half of his house, I think that's beautiful. Well, speaking of two halves of a house being made whole, first up, there's word that something that's been prayed for a long time may actually be coming about, Josh, and that, of course, is the Society of St. Pius X, the schismatic group. Supposedly, reconciliation could be happening as we speak.
Absolutely. Thanks be to God.
Yeah.
News came a couple of nights ago in an unofficial form saying that the Society of St. Pius X, which, for those of you who aren't aware with what the Society of St. Pius X is, informally known as SSPX, what this group is they're a group of what we call sede vacantists, which means that they believe in a way that, actually, I take it back, they're not sede vacantists because they don't believe that the chair of the see of St. Peter is vacant. They do believe we have a real pope. They just split off because of doctrinal differences back in 1988. Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre of that group, who was a big proponent of the traditional Mass, the what we call the extraordinary form.
Right,
now.
at that point, what was the Mass up until the Second Vatican Council?
Right, was very concerned about the direction, not so much of the church, or they would say it's the church, but really what a lot of people were doing, and all the things we've lamented on this podcast, the desacramentalizing of the liturgy and all of those things.
They saw that as a danger.
Well, clown masses, I could see why you would think that is dangerous.
Yes, indeed.
So in 1988, Archbishop Marcel Lefebvre consecrated 3 bishops without pontifical mandate. Mm-hmm. And when that happened, John Paul II said, that's it, you stepped over the line, and issued decrees of excommunication to Archbishop Lefebvre, as well as those 3 bishops he ordained. Well, a couple of years ago, Pope Benedict XVI, who is becoming known really as the ecumenical pope, lifted
We've got Anglicans coming in. We've got Presbyterians even coming in. He was the one behind the pastoral provision that John Paul II really got credit for. And then, of course, we've got the ordinariates that have been formed. And the Society of St. Pius X is also kind of in that almost that same umbrella.
We believe that's what's going to happen.
Uh-huh.
But Pope Benedict XVI, in his goodness, lifted those excommunications and said, while those excommunications are lifted, you're still suspended. But we're going to use this as a sign of goodwill to try and bring about reconciliation. And they've been in talks for years now about what things could happen within the church and how we can explain each other's differences to bring about reconciliation. And there had been Bishop Fillet, who is the leader of that group, had been in meetings with Rome. In fact, there was this doctrinal preamble that was written up by the Holy Father. And
the doctrinal preamble, which I guess, is that basically like the creed?
Well, it's basically a list of things which says we believe these things and you have to accept these things in order for us to have any further
discussion or dialogue.
And really for us to bring into full communion. Well, this has gone back and forth. I mean, it's like a chess game by mail.
That's right.
The Holy Father writes this, and they say we don't understand clarification. So he writes back and say, well, we don't understand clarification. All of these things have gone back and forth. And then, lo and behold, a couple of days ago, the doctrinal preamble was delivered to the Vatican, which Bishop Fillet said we accept the preamble.
Yeah. And this, as you say, this has been months. This has been years, probably.
Oh, years in going on, and he's basically said, "Look, we understand there's still some things that we need to work out, and to have full communion, but we certainly, based upon all of the clarifications that have been made, we believe essentially the same thing,
right?
And this is a big deal. Now, I think the Holy Father is going to bring them into the church as a personal prelature, because there's no other way you could really do it." Simply similar to Opus Dei.
I was going to say, now, a personal prelature, how is that different from a diocese?
It's basically, the easiest way to think about it is that it basically is a diocese, except that it's not territorial based.
So, for example, like the Diocese of Baton Rouge has a land mass that we claim for our physical geographical territory.
Right.
A personal prelature can exist across the entire, universe, really.
Right. It's kind of more like the Archdiocese of Military Services, which isn't in a particular place except for the United States, but it's more about a particular people, kind of like the ordinariate is. The ordinariate is the same sort of way.
I got you.
Except the ordinary of a personal prelature will, of course, have all the rights and obligations that a bishop would have, assuming that it is a bishop who is named so.
So would it most probably be Fillet?
I suspect it would be, because there's some other issues that are in place that, have to be dealt with because of the fact that the Society of St. Pius X, I personally think you're going to see a rift, because part of this group, even though you have this doctrinal preamble signed, I still think you have some members who are more hardliners that are going to say that we're not going to come aboard with this. So I think the Society of St. Pius X is going to exist in two separate fashions.
It's kind of like what the Anglican Church did, really. You have some that want to be more Catholic than the Pope, and there will always be those who will want to protest whatever unity is happening. And that's an unfortunate
I think that's
thing.
the case. Yeah, and it really is unfortunate, because if you read those articles that were released by Monsignor Nicholas Bucks a few days before,
they're beautiful. They
were absolutely
articles.
Beautiful. He wrote these articles basically telling Society of St. Pius X, look, the Holy Father has gone to extraordinary circumstances to show you his love, to show you how much he cares for you and your souls. This is an extraordinary opportunity for unity. Don't you screw this up because of pride. That's basically what he said.
It was almost a love letter. The way that it was written really was.
It absolutely was, and I'm hoping that might have had some effect on Bishop Fillet, because ultimately he said, look, we're giving in, the Holy Father is giving a lot to make this happen. You cannot simply expect that you're going to get everything you want.
Right.
You have to give in a little bit of your pride and say, some things are not important to just fight over.
Right, exactly. And that's what we're looking at here. And that in a sense, that's true reconciliation, to say, look, there are some things that we struggle with, but it's not enough to keep us from one another, because we want to do the same thing. We want to preach Christ and him crucified and risen. That's what we do. And we do that through the sacramental life of the church, through the ecumenical witness, through the evangelical witness. And that in some way is hindered so long as the chair of Peter is divided, if you will, in that sense. I mean, we know the chair of Peter isn't divided, but it seems that way when you have a group like the Society of St. Pius X that, in a sense, wants to sit on that chair, know.
And, Cardinal de Lubac, I think, absolutely had it right. In his book, The Splendor of the Church, one of the things he laments, and he says, the greatest scandal in the church is the disunity of Christians.
Sure. Absolutely.
Certainly that we cannot be united in Christ is such a grave scandal. And, we recognize, I think the church recognizes that we've done some things over time that has not helped bring about that unity. And I think the Holy Father has gone to great lengths to attempt to restore that unity. Yeah. And I think this is absolutely, absolutely beautiful if all of these things come to fruition.
And we certainly hope they do. We continue to pray for that. And so that means all the suspensions would be lifted. Well, of course, nothing's been incurred since those excommunications were lifted. But every form of that disunity that comes about from schism would be healed, even if there's a lot of stuff to be worked out. And that's a beautiful thing. I sure hope that it happens. It makes me wonder, though, what's going to happen with some of these little SSPX parishes. Like there's one in my diocese. What would then happen? How would the local bishops then begin to receive that? D.P. Pearson in the chat room says the problem with the personal prelature is that the local ordinary must allow them to function in their diocese, whereas an ordinariate would work better. Who knows? I don't know. I mean, I would like to think that a local ordinary would see something like that and say, this is a fundamental good. Let's allow it. But
yeah, and it would seem to me the Holy Father would have to make a stipulation, basically giving them that jurisdiction, that governance, and not taking that away from the local ordinary in a sense.
Which he certainly can do. Yeah. Well, good. Well, we move from that news to something that is so ridiculous it would be funny if it weren't such an indictment of the culture. Yeah. And that is the UN, the United Nations, wants to ban Dante's Divine Comedy from school curricula. I don't even know what to say to that. I mean, we read Dante in college. We you know what we read? We might have read the Paradiso in when I was in high school. I don't remember us reading Hell. Can't think.
I didn't read it in high school. I remember reading it in seminary at St. Ben's doing the Divine Comedy. But, what's interesting is I'm not so much sure that it's the UN as it is a group that consults to the UN that is speaking about this.
Yeah.
And it's completely ridiculous. Some of the things that they're saying is that because it's divided into three parts, that heaven, hell, and purgatory, of these, about a half dozen or so were marked out for criticism by the group. Some of the things they object is that Islam is a heresy, Muhammad as a schismatic, Jews as greedy, and scheming moneylenders and traitors. Now, they say that the Prophet Muhammad was subjected to a horrific punishment. His body was split from end to end, so his entrails dangled out, an image that offends Islamic culture. If you happen to have read the Dante's Divine Comedy, you will also know that the whole thing. You would also know that plenty of priests, bishops, and popes also end up in hell and have similar things happen to them as well.
That's right.
But yet you don't see Catholics going, we should not be teaching this in our schools because it might give people an unfavorable view of the Catholic Church.
Yeah. Well, right, exactly. I think the unfavorable or the favorable view would be that none of us wants to end up in hell. You would think. But again, we get this kind of in the society. Is there such a thing as hell in our society? And so even the idea of this book teaching that there could be the possibility of states of being, to me, is almost more dangerous to the culture than being portraying Jews or Muslims or even Catholics in a negative light. I think that that's an underlying thing.
And of course, the one thing they really, really object to is the statement that homosexuals are damned by the work as being against nature and condemned to the eternal reign of fire and hell.
You mean like in the Bible?
Yeah, that's a book.
So I hear.
Oh, okay.
Might even be the book. But that's the thing is, so these politically correct terms are basically being backdated. They're being looked at in today's measuring stick.
Exactly. In fact, I read someone post a quote from Chesterton. I believe it was Chesterton the other day. I'm not going to quote it exactly because I don't remember exactly what it said. But basically, actually, I take it back. It wasn't a quote from Chesterton. It was just someone in the modern culture. And it said that the words that to say something offends me means absolutely nothing because it's simply an emotion of the personal self. And to say that something offends you, get over it.
Right, exactly. And at some point, you have to do that. Yeah. That's such a... I mean... What do you do with that?
It was Chesterton who said that tolerance is the mark of a man with no conviction.
Right.
And ultimately, in our lives, we're all going to experience something which may or may not offend us.
Right.
And simply because something offends us does not mean that other person doesn't have the right to say or to do that, at least in the United States of America.
Right.
And offensiveness, which should offend people is the cross.
Right. Yeah.
The fact that, Jesus Christ himself was crucified upon the cross.
Yes.
That should be offensive. It should be people should be going out and spreading the gospel because of it. No, we have stupid things like this.
Yeah.
Speaking of, my wife the other day actually, as she's doing some work for for a telemarketing company, and calls a Jewish synagogue, and is speaking to the man on the other end. And she's saying, "I want to tell you about some faith-based programs that a group is arguing." And the guy answering the phone says, "Faith-based? What do you mean by faith-based? That offends me." Then he proceeds to explain to her that he is an atheist. He's an atheist answering the phone at a Jewish synagogogue.
I guess it's money. but
yes,
normally you wouldn't think of taking a job at a faith-based place. But
even still, if someone atheist worked at a Catholic church answering phones, you would expect that they would not answer the phone saying, "Well, your faith-based programs offend me."
Right. Yeah. You would expect that they would at least in some way represent the place that they're working.
I've never told an atheist your beliefs in the non-existence of God offend me.
Yeah. No. We wouldn't have to.
Yeah.
That's very strange. And so it makes me wonder what's the next book after Dante's Divine Comedy that gets besides the Bible, of course. Of course, I think that's already happening with the Bible, is it not?
How long before the works of Chesterton and all of those things because they're offensive?
Yeah. Well, what about works of fiction? See, because Dante ultimately it is a work of fiction that alludes to things that are non-fictional. Well, there are plenty of books that are on the school reading list that are offensive in one way or another to some group or another. But the reason that they are offensive is to teach some moral. That was Dante's whole purpose was to draw out things that were offensive in the culture because they were contrary to what was of the common good.
Right, and also
to paint what is good.
Right, and there's also a distinction that has to be made, though, between religious situations and secular situations.
Yeah.
Now, what they're advocating here is the banning of this book in a secular society. Now, we know that in Catholic culture that certainly churches have the rights. I mean, I've worked in Catholic schools where they ban certain books because it is offensive to
the teachings of the church.
Right, to the offensive to the teachings of the church. But you would certainly expect that going into a Catholic school, a Catholic atmosphere.
Yeah.
I don't believe in the public realm that one should have the right to say, "Well, this offends me," because you're certainly trying to expand beyond religious bounds.
Right.
Something that is taught at Cambridge is not the same thing that should be taught on the same level that is, Georgetown University, which is a quote unquote Catholic university.
Yeah, exactly. And that's exactly, and that's what you're hoping is that people are not going to be doing that.
Well, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing to remember. I mean, certainly if you go into a Catholic place, you expect to abide by the culture that's there, and the world. You don't expect that they're going to shun your beliefs. And in fact, you would think that if they're promoting things such as the Quran and other things of such sort,
right,
then you wouldn't be banning the Christian Bible or even the works of Dante.
Exactly. We'll be right back. You're watching the Catholic Underground. Stay right there. This portion of Catholic Underground is brought to you by you. Your prayer and financial support are what keeps us going. So please visit CatholicUnderground.com/donate to find out more. Alrighty, welcome back to the Catholic Underground, your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. In case you're joining us, we're trying something a little new. We're giving a little time for some breaks here, just so that you can chew on what we've had to offer. That may not be a bad idea. And so what we're going to do is keep on trucking here with something that I think that plagues many a priest and layperson. The notion of concelebration, oftentimes we don't even think about it. Oh, Father, there's more than one priest there. Well, they're going to concelebrate. Or there's more than one bishop there. There's going to be concelebration. But, of course, there are those that would say that the Second Vatican Council intended that concelebration be safe, legal, and rare, as Father Zulzork would put it. So,
Father, what is concelebration?
Well, as I understand it, concelebration is a sharing in the celebration of the liturgy between priests. So One priest is the principal celebrant, but whenever another priest also says the prayers of consecration, participates in the celebration of the Mass, he is called a concelebrant, and he is offering the Mass alongside the celebrant. Am I correct there in the idea? And then, of course, they do that in communion with the bishop.
Well, I think so. I think you're right. And the biggest thing, though, about concelebration is that prior to the Second Vatican Council, there weren't many opportunities.
Didn't happen a lot.
No, in fact, many priests, if you recall, at that time, priests were required under the pain of sin to celebrate Mass daily.
Right.
And
that's since been relaxed.
It's highly recommended, of course, because of various reasons. But
and I can tell you, Josh, you and I were on vacation a couple of weeks ago. I could have kicked myself in the head for not bringing my Mass kit. It was a difficult week for me, sacramentally speaking.
That's okay. Suppose I forgive you.
Good. I'm glad.
But this idea of concelebration before the council was very, very rare. In fact, the only times it ever really happened were on two occasions: the ordination of a priest, in which the newly ordained priest would concelebrate with the bishop, and again at the Chrism Mass, because all of the priests were present with their bishop. And so the idea behind concelebration is that the bishop, being ordained to the fullness of the priesthood, being prefigured by the high priests of the Jewish temple, that his priests with him would be, we recognize that priests get their priesthood from the bishop. And so the fullness of their priesthood is in communion with their father, the bishop.
Right.
And so to be gathered around the altar with him, celebrating the same Mass would fully explain and signify the priesthood, the fullness of the priesthood. And so it was really made for those moments. And to be, as I say, I'm also one of those that's safe, legal, and rare, because so often priests feel wrongly that if there's a Mass that they're in attendance at, that, well, then I must concelebrate.
Right.
Even to the point of, well, this is my 18th Mass today, so I must concelebrate. Not recognizing the fact that there's also the option of attending in choir. That, for some reason, has fallen
It's dropped out. It has dropped out for some reason.
But you see this when you go to Rome. You see these large congregations of priests who are in attendance at Mass. They're wearing cassock and surplice, usually with their stole draped over their arm, waiting for communion time, and then they place their stole over them, which is what a priest would do when attending Mass as a cleric, just an attendance, and not concelebrating. But so often I'd be very surprised if any of our listeners have seen a priest who was merely in attendance. And when I say in attendance, I'm not talking about sitting in the pew. I mean sitting in the sanctuary among his brother priests in a cassock and surplice, not concelebrating. In other words, not extending his hands at the time of the consecration, and simply being in attendance, being in choir, as they say.
The question might be, why would a priest not want to concelebrate?
There are, multiple reasons. In fact, the Code of Canon Law says that priests by authority by permission, by law, have the right to celebrate Mass 3 times on
a Sunday.
On a Sunday.
So that would include an anticipated Mass on a Saturday?
You have to leave that to the candidates, but I don't think that's included.
I don't think so. Okay, all right.
Because, there's various reasons, but it's assumed that on the Sunday, I mean, really on the Saturday, when are you going to celebrate 3 Mass anyway? I mean, except for funerals. But,
unless you have a huge parish.
Right. And the other rule is that on weekdays, they may celebrate Mass twice, and then the second time if it's pastorally necessary. But the most recent thing that has come out, which is very interesting from the New Liturgical Movement, Cardinal Canizares is speaking about the moderating the use of this. And one of the things he really talks about is that it's an innovation. He says that this was something that was born out of the Second Vatican Council. And because it was an innovation, it's something that didn't develop organically.
Okay.
That it's not something that didn't come as a legitimate need, because when you really look at it, is there a legitimate need in the church for for concelebration? I would say under certain circumstances, certainly, but
Yeah.
for this to be happening on a daily basis and even in some parishes,
Right.
On a weekly basis,
Mhm.
I think it's unnecessary.
Yeah, it is a strange thing. I mean, a lot of parishes don't have the luxury of having more than one priest these days. But why would the priest not each be offering his own mass?
Well, and
You
like
know?
for you, Father, I doubt that you have this problem considerably.
No, I hardly ever have this problem. Yeah.
No.
And yet, I mean, at some points, for example, because it is rare
Mhm.
in my parishes to see another priest in the sanctuary, sometimes another priest who comes to visit will concelebrate as a sign of presbyteral unity and also a sign of the community. Whenever, if we were having a mass, like saying before going out to eat, if another priest comes and I say, oh, well, I have to say the evening mass. He says, well, I haven't said my mass yet today. It's my day off. I'll concelebrate with you. That's again kind of a rarity, and it is a good symbol. It is a good sign for the people to see, but it shouldn't be every day that
No.
this is going on, because each priest is supposed to offer their own mass.
Well, and I think the argument to be made is what Cardinal Canizares is saying is that
Yeah.
in parishes there shouldn't be scheduled masses of concelebration.
Right.
It's really envisioned, and I don't see a whole lot of abuse of this, but really and honestly, for example, my local parish, whenever there's a situation where there's another priest, there may be a celebration, but more often than not, one of the priests in the parish will actually often just show up at the time for communion, in cassock and surplice with his stole on to assist with the distribution of communion.
Yeah.
And go back to the rectory
Mhm.
following that. And that's the idea is that priests don't need to feel obligated. Well, I'm going to this mass, therefore I must concelebrate.
Right.
I'm going to
Yeah.
be this, I'm going to be that.
And further, if there is more than one priest in a parish, this should alleviate the need for multiple extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion,
Well, exactly.
because that's part of the issue too. Is if you've got an associate or a parochial vicar in your parish, well, get the little guy up and say, here, come and assist with the distribution of communion. So that way we're actually doing something else that should be safe, legal, and rare. And that, of course, is the use of extraordinary ministers of Holy Communion.
Yeah, that's a whole nother argument. Don't get me started on that. I mean, thanks be to God, I live in a parish where we use them very rarely, and it's very, something that's not abused. I'm very happy with that.
That's right. Now, do you recall, was it just the Chrism Mass and the Masses of Ordination?
I'm pretty sure those were the only two instances.
Uh-huh.
The Easter Vigil may have also. I mean, obviously the Triduum.
Sure.
I don't know that there was true concelebration during those times. I mean, I'm sure some. I'm not going to speak to it because I don't want to get things wrong, but I'm sure some well-minded priest out there will know and will email us.
Yeah.
And letting us know if that is indeed the case. But I know even today, for example, during the Triduum is really the only times in my parish whenever we see concelebration. Because Father will concelebrate the Mass of the Lord's Supper, of course, because there can only be one Mass offered on that day other than the Chrism Mass.
Right.
And of course, at the Paschal Vigil, because that again is the only Mass that can be offered on that day other than, the only Mass can be offered on that day. So
right.
Celebration may have happened at those as well.
Yeah.
But primarily, it was, ordinations because, again, the bishop was there.
Yeah, and that's kind of the
Mass,
thing, too, is that a bishop shouldn't be concelebrating when a priest is the celebrant, right?
Well, right, because of the fact that you recognize the bishop is the fullness of the priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
So it does happen, though, where a bishop will concelebrate, but it's been so beautiful, for example, when you see bishops show up to a Mass and say, I'm just going to attend and choir, because really, if a bishop is present, you should make the offer to him, and he should be the one celebrating because he does embody the fullness of the priesthood.
That's exactly right, and that's part of it too. Is recognizing the bishop's primacy there, and also the notion that this came about as an innovation. I remember Sacrosanctum Concilium, the Constitution on the Sacred Liturgy, warning about innovation and things that are not organic, as you say.
Right,
and that's what it's kind of Cardinal Canizares is perhaps looking at, is that first of all, is this organic? It does flow from the Chrism Mass and the Masses of Ordination, but is it organic to do this at every possible opportunity?
Well, right. And he says concelebration in the genuine tradition of the church, whether Eastern or Western, is an extraordinary, solemn, and public rite, normally presided over by the bishop or his delegate, surrounded by his presbyterium and by the entire community of the faithful. But the daily concelebrations of priests only do not form part of the Latin liturgical tradition.
There you
and
go.
that's where the beauty falls into place. Whenever you see the bishop surrounded by his priests.
Sure.
And that's where you see the beauty of concelebration. Not to say that it shouldn't happen at other times, but again, safe, legal, and rare.
Yeah. There in the chat room, one says, I could see it for maybe a dean and his presbytery. That makes sense because, a dean is basically the bishop's representative in a geographical area of parishes. And so there could be times, for example, like reconciliation service, they may have a mass attached to it. Well, all the priests get together. They say the mass. The dean is the celebrant, and the presbyterate is that's a very good instance, perhaps.
Exactly.
Where it's not necessarily an innovation, but it is a micro symbol of the bishop's representation with the brother priests. Yeah. So that's a very good way of putting it too. And so where do you stand on it? Backchat at CatholicUnderground.com is a good way to let us know. In fact, we always say that if you have anything that you want to chime in on, you can send us an audio bite. You can send it to us in email, or you can certainly, if you've got the gumption, you can send it to us in a video file. We'd certainly like that. We'd play it on the air. But there's those that don't think that concelebration that just should be happening whenever and however. And then, of course, there are those that think, well, it should definitely be safe, legal, and rare. And then, of course, there are those on the fringe, I would imagine, that say concelebration should only happen with the ordination of a priest or the Chrism Mass,
Yeah, and I'm sure there are a lot of people that just don't understand what's going on either.
Right. And that's and now I find, though, with the idea that the priests never or rarely sit in choir, is whenever I have assisted in choir at certain things, I've been looked at like, well, now, Father, have you been demoted? Well, no, I'm actually just I'm assisting as a priest who is not concelebrating, and it's amazing how people immediately kind of wonder if something wrong has happened.
You had a priest friend of mine tell me recently. He said I went to a mass, and it was a big celebration, and I'm in the sacristy. He said I vested in cassock and surplice, and the pastor comes up to me and says, "Go ahead and put on a chasuble and can celebrate." He said, "No, I'm good. I've said 2 masses today." And he says, "Go ahead and put on a chasuble and can celebrate." And they go through this like 4 or 5 times. Then finally, he's like, no, I'm just going to wear my cassock and surplice and sit in choir. And certainly this old priest who had just celebrated 50 years of priesthood, I know personally, a few years back, which means he was ordained prior to the council. So he certainly knows what attending in choir is, but it's been out of disuse for so long that he's probably quite forgotten what it's like.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, there's a real beauty to it as somebody who's done that, to be able to actually sit, not as a layperson, but to be able to sit and to drink in the readings in a way that you ordinarily wouldn't be able to assist at the altar in a way that isn't concelebration. There is a use for that as well. There is a real benefit spiritually to that, and I wonder if maybe brother priests would differ in that opinion. I don't know. But you can let us know, backchat at CatholicUnderground.com. Huh?
And it's also a little silly, in my opinion, to see, 15 priests are surrounded by the altar, each taking half a sentence of the Eucharistic prayer.
Oh, yeah, it is kind of silly. But we'll leave it there. You're watching the Catholic Underground. Stay right where you are. We ain't going anywhere. Looking for some fresh Catholic content? Head over to CatholicUnderground.com, the website that has more than just the Catholic Underground podcast. You'll find new shows, video, and stuff being updated all the time. You'll be able to listen right from your iPhone or other mobile device, and you'll also be able to see the video as it comes out each week. You'll also have access to live programming, as well as find out more about our mission and help us out. CatholicUnderground.com. We are Faith Gone Digital. Alrighty, welcome back to the Catholic Underground, your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. We're here with Joshua LeBlanc. Hey, Josh, how's it going?
I'm going great.
We're rolling mightily along here. Now, we roll to a stop because I'm not surprised by this, because if you're following what's going on in the church, universal and particular in our own United States. You'll remember from the Catholic Underground in the past that there was a visitation of the women's religious houses in was it last year? I believe it was last year.
Yeah, a year before.
Or a year before. And so what happens is they make a report, right? They made a report to Rome, and then Rome comes back and delivers kind of its recommendations and whatnot. And the headline on all of the news, of course, is Catholic nuns group stunned by Vatican slap. I love this very visceral imagery, you know. And so basically, reading between the lines, is it the LC?
WR.
I always want to say LCSW, but that's social workers. Kind of the same thing. Some of the LCWR or LCSWs. Anyway, so this group, which is well known for being on the fringes within the United States, as I understand it, Josh, just about every group after the Second Vatican Council of Women Religious, they became part of this body.
I believe it's something like 80%.
Okay. And some didn't. And then most recently, there's been another group that is formed based on orthodoxy, right? Mm-hmm. Because the 80% of this within this group will say at least 60% of them are doing things that are kind of shady. And a prominent U.S. this group said it was stunned that the Vatican reprimanded for spending too much time on poverty and social justice concerns and not enough on abortion and gay marriage. That was essentially what the report said, probably among other things too.
Well, what I absolutely loved is a speech that came from Sister Joan Chittister, who was speaking unofficially.
She was the former leader of the LCWR.
Well, and they always bring her out whenever they need somebody to speak about something. But she was speaking informally about all of this, and her response was, and I'm not quoting at all, but her response was basically, I don't understand what all this is about because we followed the canonical
procedures.
We've been meeting with the CDF every year. We don't understand what this is all about. Well, SSPX has been meeting with the CDF every year. That doesn't mean that you're in conformity.
Right. And frankly, if you know you're going to go to the principal's office, you're going to tuck in your shirt.
Well, right, and that's a great point. I mean, that's like the school bully saying, "I don't understand why I'm being chastised. I'm in the principal's office every day."
Right.
Well, that doesn't mean anything.
True.
You're probably being called to the CDF because they're watching over you very carefully, and you've stepped out of line at this point.
Yeah.
But basically, what the group has been advocating, of course, were things that are contrary to the teaching of the church, such as ordination of women and some of those other things. Abortion, a personal position of. In fact, Sister Joan Chittister said that I'm personally opposed to abortion, but I don't look negatively on someone who, because of some life circumstances, chooses abortion. It's positions like that have led the Holy Father to appoint Archbishop Peter Sartain, formerly of Little Rock, now Archbishop of Seattle, as overseer of all of this.
So the Vatican has put an archbishop in charge to say, okay, let's sort this out. See, because looking at Sister Chittister's statement there, I don't look down on somebody because of the choice that they've made. Well, yeah, that's a slippery statement. Obviously, you love the person.
Well, exactly.
But you love them to conversion. That's the thing. Yeah, you have had an abortion, absolutely. Here's what the church teaches. If you've made that choice and you're sorrowful, well, then let's find a parish for you to go and have that excommunication lifted, and let's seek these forms of healing for you with Project Rachel and things like that. That is what from what I can see is what the Vatican is trying to say. There is an importance to not being silent here, and you can't just say I'm going to remain silent so somebody doesn't feel left out. See, and that's that. This was all sorts of stuff that was begun, if I may, when John F. Kennedy said, "Well, I'm not ruled by the Pope, and I may think one way as a Catholic, but I may do something completely different as your president." And that has kind of given us permission within the religious sphere to begin doing that as well.
Well, and that was exactly the case. I think that was
It was the linchpin, the
That
beginning
was
of
the
that.
starting point when people believed I can conscientiously dissent.
Yeah.
Well, if John F. Kennedy just did it and the Vatican didn't come down and rain their fist upon him,
Right.
then therefore I must also be able to conscientiously dissent and believe as I want to believe.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. That's the starting point.
And then, of course, further, you add to that not just the presidency of John F. Kennedy, but also the fallout of Humanae Vitae. Catholics, by and large, rejected that, and fire didn't rain down whenever they rejected that. And so we saw kind of this kind of quasi-enlightenment taking place, but not in conformity to the gospel. It was in conformity to the self.
Right, and that's where the difference of the idea, where the church teach that certainly conscience is primary.
Right.
But the definition, but when we say that, people often leave out that other word that's needed, and that is an informed conscience.
Yeah.
One is simply not given a conscience out of the box and goes, oh, wow, this is a shiny, brand new conscience. It's perfect. It knows everything. And therefore, I don't need the sacred teaching of the church. No.
I love it. I love my little conscience.
You're naughty. No, you take, well, in some cases, I suppose.
Yeah.
But that's the issue is our consciences. If we didn't need to be formed, then great. We're born, we're perfect, we die.
Right.
Done. But our consciences, of course, have to be formed according to the teaching of the church.
There's that mystical statement in Scripture about our Lord. He learned obedience through what he suffered, and when perfected.
Exactly.
It's a very mysterious statement.
And also, he grew in grace and stature.
Exactly, and he grew in grace and stature. And we, as those who are baptized, are called to follow in those same footsteps as the divine one. And this is what we're talking about, you know.
And there's nothing more beautiful than to realize that your conscience is being formed.
And it's tough. It's a crucifixion.
No, it certainly is.
Yeah.
Purification comes by fire.
That's exactly right.
And just as we have to, as Christians, as Catholics, certainly we all have ideas that we have to overcome in becoming conformed to the church. That's why there's a difference between authoritatively speaking on behalf of the church and having an opinion.
That's right.
I mean, certainly you can say, I have an opinion, and this opinion might differ from what the church teaches. Mm-hmm. But if you're saying, Lord, help me understand.
Yeah.
There's a difference between, having an opinion about something and saying, even though I don't understand, I assent to what your church teaches. I will obey. And again, not come out publicly and say, well, I'm for the ordination of women. Well, certainly the church is opposed to that. And so as a member of the church, and even as ourselves as theologians and people who teach on behalf of the church, not, again, the bishop being the authentic teachers, but we who take that role of apostolic service upon ourselves ultimately say, I don't have the answers.
Yeah.
No one comes to this podcast wanting to know Josh LeBlanc's opinion.
Right.
They come to this podcast and say, what does the church teach?
Sure.
And that's what we aim to bring.
That's exactly right. T.P. Pearson in the chat room, he's active tonight posting. He says, I liked my uninformed conscience. It was much easier. And that is the linchpin right there. Is now what we've fashioned in the 60s, 70s, and early 80s is coming back to bite us. Yeah. Namely, that our uninformed consciences are now receiving formation. Why? Because the the Vatican that was far away is now able to come to us and say, no, this is the truth. Here is the truth. Receive the truth. And well, it's crucifixive to groups that have been living as their own Messiah for the longest time. Mm-hmm. But at some point, the Messiah must be crucified. Whether it is our Lord who is crucified and who brings about new birth through his resurrection, or whether it is the little Messiah who must be crucified in order to be conformed with the real one. And that's the work of formation of conscience. It's the work of daily death to self and of conversion, which is what this is all about. That's why we're here. Before we go to break, we just want to make a quick mention of our Lenten giving campaign. Of course, it's an Eastertide now. We've got about 13.5 left. 14.5 left to collect. We're aiming for $15,000.
If you have that laying around, send it.
Send it on in. And if you haven't donated yet, please go over to CatholicUnderground.com and make a donation to us, because we're trying to grow a little bit here, and of course we're trying to get things ready for Catholicon. And so give us some love. If it's $5 and that's all you can afford, that's fine. If it's $500, that would be fine too. CatholicUnderground.com. We're going to take a little bit of a break. We're going to be back for our last segment, so stay right where you are, and think about maybe going over to Catholic Underground while we're in the midst of that break. So we're going to see you on the flip side of it all here. Alrighty, welcome back to the Catholic Underground, your weekly Catholic guide to the digital continent. I'm Father Chris Decker. We've got Joshua LeBlanc over there in the other box.
Mostly.
mostly there. Yeah, well, we also want to mention Catholicon 2012. It's coming up in New Orleans, Louisiana, and we're actually really proud of it. We're happy about it. We're hoping that it happens with your help. As you know, part of what we collect with our giving campaign goes to help us put on this conference, in addition to the sponsors and everything. And so, Josh, you want to tell us a little bit about Catholicon?
Well, Catholicon is going to be held September 14th through 16th, 2012 in New Orleans. You're going to be within walking distance of famous places that you've seen in all your favorite movies, like Jackson Square, the French Quarter, which is home to great restaurants, food, shopping, all of those things. If you've never had the food in the French Quarter, you're going to be in for a treat. The theme this year is Christ, the perfect communicator. We're going to talk about how Jesus came among us and how he now directs us to go among others.
Yep.
So we're inviting all sorts of people. We're inviting journalists, bloggers, media professionals of all kinds. Even if you're not involved in any of these things, if you're a catechist, a teacher, a theologian, sacred musician, software developers, if you are a Catholic sitting in the pew and you feel like you need to be so part of something bigger, that you don't want to just sit there in the pew, that you want to be something the more a part of the universal church of what's going on, come to Catholicon. You can register right now online. Registration is open. cucast.me/register 2012. Again, that's cucast.me/register 2012. We're also looking for sponsors. So maybe your boss is a Catholic and you know he has loads of money that he would want to give away. We're looking for loads of money.
We would take it.
Send him over to our website at Catholicon Expo. That's CatholicOnExpo.com. Check out our sponsors page there, or you can email us at podcast@CatholicUnderground.com. We have different levels for sponsorship, and we certainly want to have sponsors on board to help make this event all that it could be. We have some great things in store of people who are going to be there. But you can follow along on the Catholic Underground website, as well as at CatholiconExpo.com. That's CatholicOnExpo.com. Again, those dates, September 14th through 16th, 2012, New Orleans.
And we move from that to our picks of the week.
Well, my pick of the week is actually a device Father Chris turned me on to.
Hold on, Josh. Yeah, Josh got a little excited there because he forgot that we actually have a show open for that. But it's okay.
It's because I can't hear it.
You can't hear it?
I've been able to for months.
Oh, well, that's good to know. Joshua, what's your pick of the week?
My pick of the week is a device Father Chris turned me on to. It is the Belkin.
Sorry, I can hear it. Keep going.
It's the Belkin Car Audio Connect. In fact, Father, they changed the name of the device since you got it because it's called something different. Which is why I couldn't find it for the longest time. But they renamed this thing to work with the iPhone 4S. And so now it'll actually work with Siri. But basically, it's a really cool device. It's a little a disc, probably I guess about 1 1/4 inches in size, that you mount to your dashboard. And there's a wire that goes from there, plugs directly into your cigarette lighter. And then from there, there's a wire that plugs into your aux connector. And you could go completely wirelessly broadcasting audio to your stereo system. But in addition to that, you can also take hands-free calls.
It's a great little thing.
It is the most awesome little thing I've seen. Nobody else sells anything like it. And what I love about it is that there is the connector there where I can connect my iPhone up to it and charge it if I want. But if I decide I don't want to charge it, maybe I'm standing 30 feet away from my car with my iPhone and I want to broadcast music, I can do that. Yep. And that's what's really convenient about this little device. Again, it's called the Belkin Car Audio Connect, and I can't recommend it highly enough. It sells on Amazon for around $60.
Yeah, it's a lot cheaper than actually when I bought it, because I bought mine for manufacturer retail price. So
yeah,
oh well. But it is a really handy thing, worth every penny, and it's good to be hands free because you don't need to be on your phone on your ear while you're trying, if you do have to make a call. Yeah. So my pick of the week is actually something that Josh turned me on to as well. So it's kind of a sharing, a mutual sharing. This is if you have a church parish and they're after you forever. Oh, please design my website. Please design my website. Well, I'd like to tell you about the Ecclesia theme. And this, Joshua, you've actually recommended it to a couple of folks, and it's a very easy-to-use WordPress theme. If you've used WordPress, if you know how it works, I can actually show you. This is my church parish's website, and you can see there's a little bit of data. Everything in here is changeable, and it's all editable. So you can make a very dynamic website, and you can use the WordPress plugins, but it also makes things pretty, which is very nice. And Josh, I know there are things about the Ecclesia theme that you like too.
Well, and it looks like out of the box, it looked like it was written for a Catholic parish because all the things were mass times.
That's right.
And whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I like it because it's very easy to move things around with regards to widgets and getting things ready for a church in very little time.
Right. In fact, you can go. We'll put it in the show notes. A link to the demo site, and you can actually download the demo. I think there's a demo you can download. Or you may not be able to download a demo.
Well, you can look at the demo, right? There's none you can download, but you can look at their demo of it, and it's not expensive. It's like what, $39?
I think it's $35, and you can buy it right there on Theme Forest. Yeah, it's $35 for a regular license, which is not expensive for a WordPress professionally designed site that you then just have to plug your information into. And so it's a very good thing indeed. And that's my pick of the week. Let us know what your picks of the week are. You can do that by going to backchat@catholicunderground.com. That's the best way to do it, and we're so happy that you do. This has been a show that we've just kind of been working our way through, but I think it's gone pretty well. We want to mention very quickly, and I mean very quickly, our Audible pick of the week, thanks to the folks at audibletrial.com who are helping us out. John Paul the Great, Remembering a Spiritual Father by Peggy Noonan is our Audible pick of the week. We're going to make that available to you. If you go to audibletrial.com/Catholic Underground, you can get that book or any book for free. And then what you're going to get there is a 14-day trial. And that helps us out because it gives us a little bit of a kickback. Joining us, Joshua LeBlanc from his perch high atop Mount Doom. Joshua, thank you for joining us, as always, here at the Catholic Underground. We're very happy to have you, as always. You're always welcome.
Aloha.
And you know me, I'm Father Chris Decker. You can follow Josh on Twitter, Jared LeBlanc. You can follow me at Digital Catholic. We are CatholicUnderground.com, and we are Faith Gone Digital. We will see you next week.